Perfect. Thank you, Thomas. Hello. This is awesome. It's been said a few times, but I'll say it again. Welcome to day 2 in Sacramento. For me, being here in Sacramento is a little bit like coming home. Being based in DC currently. My parents live here in Sacramento. I graduated from high school in Rancho Cordova, which is about 20 minutes east of us here today. I went on to college at University of California, Davis. Is anybody here from UC Davis? A little bit? Okay, awesome. Awesome. So graduated from UC Davis. Fun fact about UC Davis, it's ranked #1 in the nation in agriculture and forestry, which is pretty amazing and pretty cool, but that's absolutely not the reason why I chose to go to UC Davis. My interest and the reason why I was attracted to Davis was, like Sam, I wanted to be a winemaker. I mean, who wouldn't want to make wine for a living, right? So I, right out of the gate, declared viticulture and enology as my major at Davis, and that was phenomenal. And it was somewhere in that first chemistry class that I was like, you know what? We need to make an executive decision and pivot a little bit. So I graduated from Davis as an English major, proud English major with, as Sam, an interest in wine, as Sam alluded to. So I went on from UC Davis, went to Northern Arizona University for grad school, finished NAU in business, and started corporate America, where I went into the fintech, financial services, and consulting spaces. That's where I've spent the bulk of my career. As Thomas mentioned, I currently work for a boutique consulting firm in DC, supporting clients in the government contracting space. So that's who I am professionally. That's what I do for a living. It's absolutely not why I'm here to talk to you today. If you will allow me, I'd like to share a very personal and sentimental story, a story about my family, our land, and our history. As Thomas mentioned, I am a proud 5th-generation small acreage landowner. My family owns about 160 acres across 3 plots of land in Virginia. Our land existed in my family long before I was around, dating back to the 1890s. And as I mature and get older, my relationship with the land has evolved, and it will continue to do so. But what remains constant in this evolution, for me personally, is how much of who I am, which is this little girl that was hanging out with my grandfather as he harvested tobacco, how much who I am is rooted in the land, and how much responsibility I feel to pass on the intimacy, the history, and the magic of our land to future generations in our family. As a child, our land was a place where my extended family convened every year. I recall everyone at the family was a cousin, or everyone at the farm was a cousin or a cousin's cousin or a great uncle or so on. Everyone was family on the farm. It was frequently a sea of people when we were there, whom were related for the most part, and all of us had a connection, a unique connection to the land. It is where I learned how to fish, or tried to fish, and tend to the animals. It's also where I would try to help my grandmother cook, pick eggs from the chicken coop, that was my job, and run and play freely with my cousins. My immediate family would travel the furthest to get back to the farm. We would drive from here in California to Virginia to spend 2 weeks on the farm every summer. And that required about 6 days of travel across the country in a van with 2 siblings and my parents, without technology as we have it today with 3 very active kids. I don't know how my parents tolerated my brothers and I on the road trip that long every summer, but they did it, and we pretty much survived. But I tell you, as soon as we would finally get to that side of the coast And it was typically the dead of night, I remember, that we would make it close to the farm after driving 6 days. And we would turn on a dirt road, which is about 1.5 miles from the farm. And as soon as we would hear that we were on that dirt road, we could hear the gravel kick up. The car would go a bit faster. The windows would come down. We would hang out the window because we knew we were almost there on the farm. We had made it. The farm, as a child, for me, the farm was a feeling of freedom and of joy and of warmth and love. The farm is where my grandparents lived and raised a family with 7 kids and one bathroom. It is where my father and his siblings as children and as young adults tended to tobacco crops to pay for the land and make a living. Relying on government programs to help pay or subsidize the land was unheard of back then, especially for landowners that looked like me and my family. Instead, my grandparents maintained the farm with hard work, with commitment, with business acumen, with drive, determination, community, and relationships. In my teenage years, and as a young adult when I was trying to pass chemistry, the farm is where we would host over 200 people for a reunion every year. We would play games and cooked and serve food and line dance, and we would give back to the community, and we would reminisce and make forever memories. The farm is also where my grandparents lived as long as they could safely by themselves until we as a family made the heart-wrenching decision to move them into a care facility to assist and support them in the latter years of their lives. Thanks to my father, my aunt, and uncles, upon them becoming adults, they took over and managed the business of the farm, when my grandparents became an age that they could not. They made sure the taxes were paid, and that's typically, out of their own pockets, and ensured the family continued to be good stewards of the land by working with foresters and having forest management plans in place on all plots. Thankfully, our titles are clear, but unfortunately, not all underserved or minority landowners can say that. Out of the 3 plots that we own, 1 piece of land took my family 13 years to obtain a title. My great-great-grandfather purchased this land in 1892. My grandmother, knowing it was heirs property, asked my father before she died to go get the land she grew up on. It took 13 years and outreach to 200 descendants, 13 years of perseverance and determination to obtain a clear title. But today, that land, that plot, is legally owned in full by my family. I know my grandmother's heart is at peace knowing the land she grew up on, her land, is safe and secure. Unfortunately, the story of potential land loss due to heirs property issues is not unique to my family. Heirs property is when a landowner dies without a will or any form of estate planning. So the legal transfer of that land before death never happens. As a result, descendants of the deceased take ownership of the land without a clear title since estate issues remain unresolved. Due to heirs property issues over the past century, Black landowners have lost north of 12 million acres, with most of that loss occurring just in the last 70 years. Heirs property is one of the many inequities in agriculture, full stop. Unfortunately, this issue is common to landowners of color, and not only leads to a loss of land if left unmitigated, but a loss of family history and a loss of legacy, particularly for future generations. While heirs property is no longer a threat to our farm, there is one looming problem that continues to expose our land to imminent risk. That is essentially, how does my family, as small acre forest landowners, find opportunities to generate revenue? How do we position our land at minimum for it to pay for itself? Younger generations in my family were not alive yet to feel and witness the magic and the intimacy generated by my grandparents when they lived on the farm. Younger family members, they know the farm is special, they know that, but it's special to some at a financial cost, and that's a risk. As when it's their turn to manage the upkeep of the land and pay taxes, and that becomes more of a financial out-of-pocket burden than a positive return, I'm sure they will be more inclined to walk away from the farm. And I'm not saying it would be an easy decision for them, but financially speaking, they might not have a choice. So my mission is to find opportunities for our land to flourish. I can't replicate the memories made for me on our farm when I was younger, but I can make sure the land is around and not viewed as a burden for the generations ahead. This way they can make their own memories and continue the legacy. So what are we doing now as a family? We harvest timber on all 3 plots. Shocker. This is the main and long-standing source of revenue that we generate. As everyone here knows better than I, timber requires a substantial upfront investment in the form of reseeding and years to realize a return. So as our land gets inherited by the younger generations, those who are willing to wait 30 years to cut timber only to invest that money right back in the land are fewer and far between. Not everyone will be on board with this approach, given the cost and the timing of the return. As a result, again, some family members in the future, might opt out and sell their portion of the land for faster payout. To try and mitigate this risk and diversify our revenue streams, if you will, we as a family are considering other options, such as we're discussing solar and considering that as a viable opportunity. We have partnered with a very talented professor at Shaw University in North Carolina, Dr. Michael Harrington, to research and develop hemp. My mother, being the evergreen, successful entrepreneur that she is, makes and sells a topical hemp, as you see here in the middle, that we grow in our hoop house on the farm. We have teamed with the Sustainable Forestry and African American Land Retention Network, SFLR. Ebony Alexander of the Black Family Land Trust is a leader of SFLR and helped us identify potential USDA programs and grants that we might qualify for. Unfortunately, however, these activities are just not enough, though. Between limited opportunities available and even fewer programs we might qualify for given the small number of acres that we own, the future looks a little bleak to find opportunities, in addition to harvesting trees, for dependable year-over-year revenue generation. So what will help solve this issue? More opportunities. More opportunities for small acreage landowners. Opportunities that will provide a quicker return on investment. We are also looking for a chance to learn and engage and partner and just overall support. We are looking to protect the land through land activity. The downstream impact of doing nothing is future generations will see the land as a burden, not as their inheritance. The issue of land sustainability and return for small acreage forest owners is personal to me. It is what I describe as core to my DNA. It is my mission and something I'm determined to move the needle for my family. And if I can help other landowners in similar situations along the way, it would be an honor and a complete privilege. I view each of you as critical contributors to the solution. From my vantage point, looking out to all of you, you are conduits, you are aides, you are change agents, and you are problem solvers. You are building bridges for landowners like me and my family here on the screen, and opportunities for us to uphold our legacy. The research you lead, the programs you manage, the relationships you cultivate indirectly and directly impact people like me and my family. There's a Japanese concept called ikigai. I don't know if anyone's heard of it. It's basically, if I may define it, your passion and your belief and your values and your vocation. It's what ikigai is, your purpose. It's kind of the fire in your belly. It's the challenge that gets you up each morning to conquer the world. You can think of ikigai as these intersection points in orange in this Venn diagram. It's essentially doing what you love, doing what you're good at, making a positive contribution to the world, and getting paid for it, because that's kind of important. Ikigai is essentially what makes you tick, what innately is ingrained in you. What is the work that speaks to you? What's seamless, right? What doesn't feel like work all the time? My ikigai is doing work that impacts people and spaces in a positive way. Me finding my purpose in being a good steward of my family's land, protecting the legacy, and finding opportunities for the land to pay for itself, and therefore unburdening future generations, that is essentially my ikigai. That is my purpose and greatest potential accomplishment to work for and put energy towards. When you think about what you love and what you're good at and making a positive contribution to the world, I hope you consider not only your intention to do those things, but also your impact. And I encourage you all to define your impact by not only the number of trees and the landowners and acres you touch with programs and research, but also by the makeup and the diversity of those landowners as well. Why? Why is it important to prioritize diversity in your work? It's a fair question. We talk about it, but why is it important? Because underserved landowners account for over 4.5 million acres, or just under 1.5% of the country's 3.4 million producers. That's approximately 49,000 landowners at minimum. So simply put, from my perspective, diversity is not a social good, it's a business advantage. It drives business. Diversity leads to greater perspectives, which generates better ideas, better solutions, better opportunities for all, and that's factual. Dr. Marcus Collins is a head of strategy at a New York-based creative ad agency called Wheaton and Kennedy, and he works with companies to create and cultivate impactful relationships with customers. He's also a respected marketing professor at the University of Michigan. And Dr. Collins, he's helped launch brands like the Brooklyn Nets and has worked for Apple and Nike and Beyonce and other global mainstream brands. So he knows a thing or two about building connections with customers and closing opportunity gaps. He's written a book called For the Culture, the power behind what we buy, what we do, and who we want to be. So to summarize his research at an aggregate level, Dr. Collins says for a product or service to be considered holistically successful, no matter the industry, no matter the sector, cultural awareness, empathy, and diversity must be present and top of mind. He concludes, the better we understand people, the better our work becomes. So trying to relate that concept to us here in the room, no matter how innovative your research and programs might be on paper, if there's not an importance and focus that includes all forest landowners, which includes underserved landowners, then your efforts fail to represent the full spectrum of your base. Said another way, your efforts and your reach will not include your full market. So what can you do? How do you reach everyone? How do you reach landowners that look like me, or the landowner in the small rural counties across the country that aren't aware of your work or the value you might bring to their land? How does every tree farmer have the same, if not similar, opportunities for diversifying revenue, for generational ownership and success? Well, I think the answer is much more nuanced, right, than we have time here to solve. But I think we can make small steps to mend the gap, small steps. Your work can contribute to ensuring inclusion and cultural diversity in the forestry space. Back to Dr. Collins. I had an opportunity to meet with him, and I told him how wonderful the SAF organization is, how amazing the leadership is of Terry and Sam, and how important a conference like this is to convene industry and academic thought leaders like all of you. I elaborated to Dr. Collins how critical your work is to landowners like me. And I asked for his thoughts. I said, if you were here with us today in Sacramento, and as it pertains to the minority landowners, what would you recommend? How would you establish that trust? In response, he challenged us to prioritize and seek an understanding and closeness to the landowners we are impacting. And he says, remember closeness and understanding and partnership. It's not acquired, but it's earned. It takes time, especially when you have a customer like a multi-generational family like mine, where ownership is shared and managed collectively. He went on to say, at the end of the day, people want to feel connected. People want to feel seen. And as soon as this is understood, that's where the magic, so to speak, happens, right? That's where the needle moves. That's potentially where, in our case, opportunities could exist. My story and my land and the faces you see on the screen right now represent my family. But I'm just one family. There are many, many, many stories like mine. Many families who want and need opportunities to be good stewards of their land while keeping the land in the family. I say this just to remind you that your work is scalable. If you can lead with impact, not just intention, and seek to understand all landowners in your ecosystem, your work will scale in both breadth and in depth. So what is the first step? What could be your first or your next step? I would offer prioritize empathy, seek self-awareness, widen your aperture, set aside biases and assumptions, because we all have them. Make a concerted effort to see the world and this space of forestry and tree farmers through a different lens, and a lens not like our own, your own. Have conversations with landowners from all backgrounds. Prioritize building those relationships. Consider all landowners, large and small, your target audience, and never forget the why behind your work. My family's forest management plans, our acre count, the health of our trees are all completely, absolutely important, of course, but the memories made and the legacy embedded in our land is important as well. And I know my grandparents and my father and aunt and uncles would say the exact same thing. I don't know in my grandparents' wildest dreams if they thought or if they could have predicted one of their grandchildren would be standing before you today talking about the magic of our land. But it's only right. It's only right that I try my best and carry the torch as best I can. For my grandparents, their land gave them a control of their destiny. It gave them agency. It gave them something tangible to pass down to generations. And all of that remains very true and applicable today. Again, this is my ikigai. Our land and all that it represents is not just in my DNA. I'd argue it is my DNA. So when it was time for us to leave the farm every year and return back to California in a van with 5 people, my grandmother would send us with food. She sent us off with food, rolls, you name it, blankets and keepsakes and anything else she thought we might need or want for the long drive home. And she would cry and she would hug and she would cry some more. And my brothers and I, when we would drive down the dirt road, we'd watch her from the windows as long as we could. And my grandfather was much more stoic, and he was a man of strong integrity and honor, but very few words. So he too would stand at the porch and watch us off, but he'd walk away a little bit sooner than my grandmother would, and I think it was to not show so much emotion. I am honored beyond measure to continue the legacy. And you know what? It's not just me. I have cousins and I have 2 brothers who are connected to the land and are invested in the land, and we show it in different ways. Your partnership and your knowledge and your access to programs and your plans play such a crucial part in my family's continuum and the trajectory of underserved landowners who are in similar positions. Thank you for listening to a very personal and vulnerable story about my family and our beloved land. I encourage you to start similar conversations with landowners. Remember to widen your aperture, listen with empathy, cultivate trust and partnership. And I know it's not easy with everything else you're doing, but it's so incredibly important. I personally would love to stay in touch and continue the conversation. It's one conversation we would continue, or we could continue. Thank you so much. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, thanks. Ready?
Wow. Thank you. Standing ovation, well deserved. Thank you, Kedren. That was impactful. Thank you for sharing your perspective of being a landowner,
Yeah.
tree farmer, and maintaining your family's legacy. We're going to have a quick rapid-fire discussion just to talk about some things here, keep it conversational.
I would love
But as you shared your story of generational dynamics of your family forest, I'm curious, because of heirs property is a complicated and complex animal, how did your family stay motivated to continue this process and not give up?
It was my grandmother's last wish to my father to go get her land, and I don't know what is more motivating than that, right? But that's what kept my father moving, and he was the one that led the effort. But knowing that that is our inheritance, it's an extension of our inheritance, I think was a secondary motivation. But it was truly my grandmother's request, and how do you not stay motivated with that?
Right. Had his marching orders and he said, let's go get it.
Absolutely.
Great. Did you utilize any legislation of like partition acts or anything that took place during that time?
I think that became law in 2020, if I recall. Fortunately, that was law or became law after we had cleared our title. So no, I wish we were able to take advantage of that, but that was after we had title of the land, clear title of the land.
So for those that don't know a little bit, but the Uniform Partition of Heirs Property Act is a law that's been enacted for, I guess it came law in 2010, but in certain states they haven't enacted or passed that law. But if one co-tenant initiates a sale, the other co-tenants must be given an opportunity to buy the tenant's share before that land can be sold. Prior, one co-tenant could come in and take over and auction it off, and it'll be done based on that one share or interest coming in from that one co-tenant. But this act also requires judges to consider, other things outside of just the value of the land, but the cultural, sentimental, and historical significance of that land before they sell it. And if that land is not sold, it must be sold on the open market instead of at an auction. And their families can receive a fair price versus that auction price that they have. So as of 2023, 22 states have passed the Uniform Partition Heirs Property Act, and Virginia being one.
Gotcha.
What other resources did you all use?
SFLR, my father started the effort. I think after he received his marching orders, to your point, he got the land appraised and found a local lawyer. We were here in California, based here in California at the time, so he found a lawyer out in Virginia and just started the process from there. I think he was his way, a good way down, and the family was a good way down, and the effort when we realized that there's a resource, SFLR was a resource, and particularly Ebony Alexander of Black Family Land Trust. And so she was instrumental in just sharing what other families were doing that were kind of on the same plight or had been on the same plight in terms of clearing title and heirs property. So that was critical. But essentially at the time that was the only kind of additional resource that we used.
Okay. And SFLR, Sustainable Forestry and African American Land Retention Network,
Right.
was launched in 2012 by the U.S. Endowment of Forestry and Community in partnership with the USDA and the Natural Resource Conservation Services, NRCS, as a method to help Black-owned forest landowners keep their land resolving ownership issues and also understanding the value of responsible managing forest land sustainably. This network has 8 organizations and one Black Family Land Trust that you've worked with diligently in Virginia, that across the Southeast, and great work efforts that they are doing. You mentioned during during your presentation that Black landowners have lost millions of acres. Just like to provide a brief history of Black American land loss.
Sure.
Former slaves viewed land as key of advancing freedom beyond the removal of chains, and they welcomed General William Sherman in Savannah, Georgia in 1865. This was where General Sherman asked 20 black ministers what they needed. The way we can best take care of our land is to have land. The best way we can take care of ourselves is to have land. The spokesperson, Reverend Garrison Frazier, told General Sherman. Sherman's Field Order 15, or better known as 40 acres and a mule, provided free slave men with 40 acres of abandoned land across the Sea Islands. However, that dream of land ownership and economic independence was short-lived as President Andrew Johnson restored most of the abandoned land to the original white landowners. However, even with the little assistance and few resources, it is estimated that black Americans were able to amass 16 to 19 million acres of farmland by 1910. Racism, discrimination, and the lack of access soon led many black landowners to seek better opportunities in northern urban centers, thus the beginning of the Great Migration, and further declined the black American land ownership. Many black landowners also lost a lot of their land due to unclear title. In seeking to protect their lands, black landowners face difficulties in accessing quality legal assistance. A professor of law at Boston College, Thomas Mitchell, mentioned the original sin is many of these families, when they first got their property in the late 1800s, tried to get a lawyer, but no one would represent them. And between 1910 and 2007, black families lost about 80% of farmland. And since 1910, black families have been stripped of billions of dollars because of that land loss. To help involuntary land loss, Enviva's Heirs Property Fund partners with organizations, property professionals throughout the U.S. Southeast to assist families to clear title, secure clear title, help them capture sustainable value from their land, and advocate of public policy solutions. And we partnered. Enviva partners with organizations within the SFL Law Network, and we started this initiative last year. We're roughly committing to $250,000 to provide financial support to those professional services in those areas I mentioned. I'm pleased to say we worked with the Black Family Land Trust in Virginia, the Roanoke Electric Cooperative in North Carolina, and the Winston County Self-Help Cooperative in Mississippi. And we have intent to expand into the other state organizations that are doing this great work. We'd like to go ahead and pivot.
Sure.
You're on the board at American Forest Foundation.
Yeah.
I'm sure AFF is focusing on generating revenues for families. What are some of those works that AFF is doing to generate revenue for small farm landowners?
You talk about, or I referenced change agents, and I really believe the work at AFF under Rita Height is one of those change agents. So the remit or the objective of AFF is carbon, completely. And what's fascinating is they're really, the team is really trying to structure how do small acreage landowners participate in carbon markets, right? And what type of model can be created that not only small acreage landowners can participate, but how can we condense the return that they might see in participating in programs like carbon? How can that be a little bit quicker than it is in harvesting trees? So that's the primary objective of the work, and it's really exciting to see them execute that.
We look forward to seeing much more of that. How does your family make decisions on the farm?
How do we make decisions? I think when my uncles and aunt and father took over the farm, one of the first moves was they moved the farm into an LLC. And so it's not one person, but it's the business, the organization, the LLC making decisions, and there's board members, and each board member has a vote. And every decision is made by that board. As I don't know if anybody's done business with family, that could be a little tricky, a little spicy. Board meetings are a little spicy, but they've done it for years, and it's pretty. I definitely thought it was a normal thing when I was younger, but as I get older, I am quite appreciative and quite in awe the decisions they made when they were younger and how it's benefiting my generation and even beyond generations than me.
All right, awesome. Let's talk a little bit about your family.
Yes.
Your photos remind me of great innocence as you were looking at your grandfather as a child, and then looking at him showing you how to harvest tobacco, for example, and you had so many questions, I'm sure, as we all do as kids as we're growing up. How do you think that can be replicated for the next generation?
It's gathering. It's really, I mean, because I even find it where I'm at in my evolution with the land is you don't know all the questions to ask. You know, I don't, particularly not coming from the space, I don't know the acute questions to ask to get all the information, but it's just being on the land and it's hanging out with family, even if they were cousins and or my father and his siblings, it's learning. So I see that happening in the younger generations now that we have a couple beyond me. It's the same thing. If I may say, when we would have reunions every year, there was a time where we would have this thing called Granny Camp, and it was essentially the week before the reunions where the grandchildren would hang out with their grandparents for a year, and it was always fascinating to me because I would come in at the end of Granny Camp and everybody just looked exhausted, like whooped exhausted. But those kids that were in Granny Camp are now in their early 20s, and the stories that they tell, and when they're on the land, you'd think that they own the land, like the way they talk about it and their ownership of it, it's quite beautiful and fascinating. So I think how we maintain those memories and incubate those memories and pass them down. It's just time on the land. It's time with the people that know about the land, and it's just telling stories.
We may have to steal that Granny Camp. Our reunion is taking place.
Beware, but something to think about.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. I remember, we have family land in Alabama, and growing up, about 30 miles, I definitely didn't have to drive 6 days to get to my hometown,
Right.
to our family land. But just you spoke about the arrival, how, you was at peace, and you hang out with your cousins, and you may have had some nicknames, and you kind of hated, didn't want to, have those. I'd had one. But how did, just the family dynamics, you never knew what was going on, but, like you said, some kind of way they made it happen.
Right.
As a child, so you were there. But how does that new generation feel, or do you think they feel about becoming the next leaders, torchbearers of when their time comes?
Wait a second. Did you have a nickname? Is that what I missed that? What was your nickname?
I did have a nickname. It was Bubba.
Bubba. Bubba.
Never got a chance to meet my grandfather, but as you spoke so highly of yours, that was the story I had. So as a child, you hated it, but now I embrace it.
Got it.
Because it stands for so much now. So
I love it. So I'll call you Bubba.
Yeah, Bubba's my new name.
You got it.
All right, for the rest of the convention. I like it.
So the question,
how does the new generation feel or about becoming the next leaders of when their time comes?
Kind of what I said earlier, there's no, there's not a question. I would argue if you ask them right now, they would say that they are making decisions on the farm right now. They truly have embraced ownership even now. And I think the responsibility that I have, and I've seen my father and his siblings have, is to make sure that they are at the table, so to speak, now. So not waiting until, we lose someone or it's a kind of a hardcore, if you will, time frame for them to be indoctrinated into it's now. They're making decisions. They are part of the dialogue. So I don't think that they see it or think about it in any other way. Like I said, I think some of them believe that they are dictating what's happening on the farm now, and that we wouldn't want it any other way.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. And I just got to ask,
Yeah.
If your grandparents were here today, what would you think of the work that and interest of maintaining that land, the family land?
What they would think of my
your-
interests?
yes.
Oh, wow. I think that, I mean, of course, they'd be proud. They were proud when I was picking eggs out of the chicken coop. I mean, they were proud grandparents. But I also think that they, equally how I feel about my nieces and nephews and younger cousins, they wouldn't expect it any other way, right? So I think this is what is expected. This is why they made sacrifices and did what they did. And they would say, this is what we expected. This is what we planned, how we planned it.
Proud but expected.
Yes, exactly.
Well, in closing, I just want to thank you, Kedren, for sharing your insights. You've given us a lot to think about and discuss over these coming days.